The hour of 6:30 PM having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Planning Board. This meeting is also being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel. The video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. All actions taken during this evening's meeting will also be posted on the Planning Board webpage. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the homepage and subscribe to the city meetings email list. The public and other board members will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. Will the staff please conduct the roll?
Harold Farrington,
Here.
Roberta Mastrogiovanni, Mayor Jay Kahn, Councilor Mike Remy,
Here.
Sarah Vizani, Ryan Clancy,
Here.
Armando Rangel,
Here.
and Kenneth Cost.
Here.
And then for the alternates, Stefan Mayu, Tammy Adams, Michael Hafer,
Here.
and Joey Cosivera.
Here.
Okay, so given who's in attendance, I would invite Mr. Hafer and Mr. Now I got your name all messed up. Kosover. Sorry about that. No, yeah, that's all right. I'm a little under the weather. Mr. Kosover to participate as voting members in tonight's meeting. Okay, first item on the agenda is a review of the meeting minutes from October 27th, 2025. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the October 27, 2025 meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Remy. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rangel. Any questions, comments, or changes? I didn't see any. All right, so let's call the vote. All in favor of the minutes? Any opposed? Okay, minutes are passed or approved. Next on the agenda is a final vote on conditional approvals. This is a standing agenda item. As a matter of practice, the board will issue a final vote on all conditionally approved plans after all of the conditions precedent have been met. This final vote will be the final approval and will start the 30-day appeal clock. Are there any approvals tonight that are ready for final vote? I didn't see any in the packet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, there was one item that was close, but they didn't quite make it, so nothing
Okay.
for this evening.
Maybe next month. Okay, good. Okay, so really we have just one public hearing tonight, which are amendments to the Planning Board regulations. This is a carryover from last month. Planning Board proposes to amend its subdivision regulations, site development standards, earth excavation regulations, and applications procedures in the Land Development Code, including sections 20.2, 21.6, 25.3, 25.5, 26.10, 26.12, 26.14, and 26.19. The proposed amendments are intended to clarify language within the code, correct errors with respect to wording, and update submittal requirements to match current practice and reflect recent changes to state law regarding the timeframes for active and substantial development and substantial completion of subdivision and site plan applications. In addition, the proposed amendments would modify the board's site plan review thresholds to create new thresholds for commercial and multifamily street access permits, modify the threshold for new additions, and establish thresholds for proposals to create new residential dwelling sites. And that's just about the end of the voice I have left, so. Mary, I'll turn that over to you now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mary Brunner, Senior Planner, and I know that was a long list, but a lot of these changes I hope are really just straightforward, minor fixes. So I do have a presentation tonight to just go through everything. I'm going to start by just giving a little bit of context and background about where the Land Development Code came from and what the goals of that project really were, because they're very much aligned with longstanding economic development goals that the city has had and the city council goals that get adopted every 2 years. So I just want to review that. I'm going to go through the proposed amendments, talk about how they're consistent with the master plan, in my view at least, and then open it up for discussion. So I'll just jump in.
Great.
Great. So I know not all of you were here when we did this project, so I apologize for those of you who were have to live through this again. But several years ago, I think it was actually in 2017 that this project started. The city, this was really the main implementation that came out of the 2010 master plan, was to go through all of our land development codes and regulations and zoning and clean them up and put them all into one place. So the land development code, which we have today, is still relatively new for the city. It was formally adopted in 2021, took several years to develop. And prior to that code, we had, our regulations were sort of scattered all over the place in different locations, sometimes contradicted each other. We had like 5 different definitions for gross floor area. So as you can imagine, it was cumbersome and difficult, not only for staff to use, but for developers. So this was identified as the top priority in the 2010 Comprehensive Master Plan, to clean this up and make sure that our regulations are actually serving the community's goals. The main goals of this project, the tagline was building better together, and then the 3 sort of messaging words were efficient, simple, and thoughtful. So that was kind of like the overall guiding theme. And really the project goals were to make our regulations easier to navigate, reduce confusion, and then increase efficiency and streamline wherever possible. And part of this came from prior to the project, we had been hearing pretty consistently that our regulations can be a barrier to development. And then throughout the land development code process, we actually held a developer roundtable monthly, did a lot of one-on-one outreach to developers to try and understand, for those of them who have developed in Keene, for those of them who haven't, what are the main barriers, what would help them to actually do projects in Keene. And I think one of the biggest themes was that anything that increases the time increases the cost. And almost more importantly is anything that increases uncertainty will make or break whether they decide to even pursue a project. And so that was something that we really had in the forefront when we were working on these regulations. So the idea here was that by putting all of the regulations into one place that's easy to navigate, pretty user-friendly as far as codes go, will both reduce confusion, make it easier, simpler, help developers understand exactly what's expected of them. And then in addition, we did things like create the minor project review committee and raise the thresholds for projects that go to the planning board. And the reason why I bring that up is because the minor project review committee is a topic that I'm going to be talking about tonight, because it's related to your site plan review thresholds. The minor project review committee was really intended to be a middle tier of review. So previously, projects that would have had to go to the planning board could theoretically go to this minor project review committee, have a shorter turnaround time, thus reducing the cost of the project, and kind of incentivizing developers to come up with projects that meet our regulations so that they can go through this quicker and cheaper process. In reality, what we've found is that very few projects can qualify to go to the minor project review committee based on the thresholds that we currently have. The folks that have gone through the process, we've heard really great feedback. They really appreciate it. It's, you know, they can go to a meeting during the day, which is a huge convenience factor, but also a cost savings for them. There's still a public hearing, there's still notice to the public, but it's just faster, more straightforward, less daunting, I guess, for the developer. So this is especially beneficial for folks who maybe aren't as sophisticated. Like, we're not talking about, you know, big developers who do projects in Boston. These are sort of like mom and pop shops that are just doing a one-off project in Keene. So it's really helpful for them to be able to go through a simpler process. And so that was one of the goals of looking at the site plan review thresholds. So I'm just going to jump into the proposed amendments unless there were any questions about sort of the goals of the land development code project. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that a lot of these are more cleanup things. So this first one, so I'm going through in the same order that's in the memo in your packet. So number one is basically taking this statement that we found in the public improvement section of the land development code, which is basically, I think of it as those are the public works regulations in Article 23. And in that article, it has a requirement for subdivisions that's not mentioned in the subdivision regulations. So we just want to build that connection in so that, you know, somebody who's wondering what the requirements of a subdivision are will figure them out by reading the subdivision regulations and not have to just know that they're supposed to look in another spot. And basically all it says is that in accordance with Article 23 of this LDC, the owner or developer shall provide permanent reference monuments, and final subdivision plans shall not be signed and recorded until after the monuments have been installed by the developer and verified by the Public Works Director, or security and amount deemed satisfactory to the Public Works Director is posted, ensuring the monuments will be set. So you may notice that that is very identical to many of the conditions that you've seen. And we've been making those conditions so that developers are aware that this is a requirement, because it's not actually in the subdivision regulations. So this will add it to the subdivision regulations.
Councilor Remy?
Thank you. My only thought would be to, in the interest of simplicity and not having to track this in two locations at any given time, because in theory that happens, and this is what's happening right now, right? Is if it all should be in the subdivision or location or subdivision regulations, should we strike it out of the section 23 or Article 23? And that way that it's only in one place. So if we go back and change it in 23, we don't have to go change it again in section 20.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we'll be bringing a second ordinance forward to City Council that changes the portions of the LDC that are that aren't within the planning board's purview. So Article 23 is outside of the planning board's purview. It's not part of your regulations. So the planning board can't change it, but City Council can. So we will be bringing a separate ordinance through to City Council that's kind of a companion to this, that will address that. But yeah.
Then my only comment would be, should we not include the language in accordance with Article 23 of this LDC? Because if you're about to strike it out of Article 23, otherwise we're gonna have to come back and do this again to just, I'm good either way, but I just, assuming that the council was to get rid of the cleanup language, then this will say it and then it won't be in there.
Yeah, I think it's kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's putting, what's the saying, the cart before the horse. I don't know.
It's presumptive that the council will get rid of it.
Yes.
But it doesn't, it is still legally binding even if the council doesn't. It's just repetitive. It doesn't
That's
have to
true.
refer to itself and say that in 23 I also say this.
Okay, so yeah, we could change it to just say
The owner.
the
or-
owner. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that way, if you eventually change Article 23, you don't have to come back and change this again.
Okay, so number 2 is to define a term that we use in the site development standards multiple times, but we don't have defined anywhere within the land development code, which is primary entrance. And this came up during a site plan review a couple years ago, and it just created confusion in exactly everything that we didn't want to do with this project. So we figured it would be helpful to just include a definition. Because it's sort of a niche definition and it could potentially have unintended effects if we made it a definition for the whole document, we opted to just keep it a definition for this specific section, which is the screening standard in your site development regulations. And so basically today, the screening regulations already state that you can't have a service area or drive-through windows and lanes, et cetera, on a facade with a primary entrance. But it doesn't define what a primary entrance is. And so what we're proposing to do is under the general standards for screening, add a new section E that says wherever possible, service areas, drive-through windows and lanes, mechanical equipment, parking areas, and other areas likely to generate noise, dust, traffic, or other disruptive conditions shall not be located adjacent to a primary entrance. For the purposes of this section, primary entrance shall mean the front and/or street-facing points of ingress and egress to a building. So it doesn't really change anything, it just creates that definition of what we think primary entrance means, or what was intended with that.
Mary, I'm just thinking of McDonald's and Wendy's on Winchester. They don't really have their front facade doesn't have any doorways. I mean, I guess the doorways face the street, but they're on the side of the building.
Yes, which I think would be allowed with this because it has to be a street-facing facade. So as long as the drive-through window and lane isn't, like in that instance, as long as they're not along or parallel to Winchester Street, they would be allowed.
No, I understand that part, but
Okay.
you could read this and say that McDonald's has no primary entrance.
I'm aligned to what you're saying. It seems like this would say that McDonald's has no primary entrance.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting example, and I'm sure there are other use cases like that where there is not a street-facing entrance.
Yes. And that's why we wanted to define it, because you could interpret primary entrance to mean the main entrance to the building, which I don't think is what was intended with this standard. Otherwise, saying that you can't have a drive-through window or that you can't have service areas adjacent to it would be pretty restrictive. And so we had this come up with, I think it was with 310 Marlborough Street, where the main entrance to the apartments was going to be on the side of the building set like 200 feet back from the road.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
that elevator on the side with 310 that they were
Yes.
going to have the dumpsters visible from where the people were going to be coming in and out. They're like, yeah, but this is a residential and people want their dumpsters near-ish to where they're coming in and out of the building and not having to go to this really far away spot. That said, I do think the intent of this was to say that the main in and out, we don't want your stuff visible from there. But the question I think we're trying to ask is that an overstep and we don't really care as long as it's not street facing? Because that's how I read this as we don't want that stuff near a primary entrance. And if the building looped around and the main entrance is on the back away from the street, we don't want your dumpster right next to your main entrance. That's how I read the language. I've got the LEC here too. It's like screen it so that your main entrance doesn't have that. But I think that's us overstepping into they're further into their aesthetics than I think we need to.
So can I ask, are you agreeing that the primary entrance should be narrow to just entrances along a street-facing
I think we should
facade?
get rid of the word primary entrance and say that that it should be screened from entrances along the street facing. And get away from calling it a primary, if there are entrances along the street facing, or, what was the phrasing you have on here, along the street facing or the front and or street facing points of ingress, that entrances along those shall be screened. But get away from the word primary entrance because it does imply the main entrance. And if the main entrance isn't street facing, the point McDonald's
Yeah.
main entrance is on the north side of the building. I think we're over, like, analyzing it, but
Yeah, there would be a few sections that we would have to change then, because there's multiple specific sections that refer to a primary entrance.
yeah. 'Cause
So what's, yeah, that goes back to what are we trying to do with this? We're trying to keep dust and drive-throughs from the primary entrance. And the concern was a couple of years ago, there was a.
Can you turn on your microphone, please?
Sure, thank you. So there's, primary entrance sounds like it's used throughout the code, so we shouldn't get rid of that term. And if that's the case, then what the goal of this change was to, why do we need to define, I guess, is it making it harder? Maybe there's like nice flexibility in an undefined primary entrance, so buildings with, like McDonald's, that have the primary entrance off the parking lot, that's the primary entrance, and you wouldn't want a drive-through right there. So I guess, is it worth the change here, or is?
Mr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a distance for located adjacent? Like, is there a specified distance for a dumpster? Okay.
No, yeah, so that was part of the reason for this, is just to make it clear to somebody when they're trying to design their site what we mean, so they're not trying to guess and then having to rework their design after getting feedback from staff or the board. So I think I'd be open to, so the term primary entrance is used several times in this section of the code. I would say it's also used elsewhere in the code in a different way. So I would be open to changing the term, using I'm fine with whatever you all think is best to do. But it would be, I think, helpful just to clarify for developers what it is exactly that you're looking for here.
Counselor Remy?
uh,
Oh, okay. You want- Mr.
Me?
Cost,
you
go ahead.
First.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole idea is street facing, where we want, whether ends up being on, out on West or downtown, having entrances that look like entrances, and you walk in them and not having dumpsters right in front of them. But, I mean, I'm thinking of McDonald's, the drive-in and there is a primary entrance, I think, and the cars line up kind of in front of that primary entrance to go through the drive-in, because the drive-in's after that. And I think all kind of fast food, standalone buildings are like that. So I don't think that really matters. But I think street facing is what we want to protect. And so if there was a way to emphasize that. And not so much because if we start to get a site where there's entrances, say, around corners and courtyards and stuff, on, say, some kind of development, again, what would be most important is the street facing, and what happens in those courtyards, maybe not so much. I mean, it might be important to the residents and the people that live there, but I would think the developer or the architect would think about that to make it a good experience, and it would be hard to control. So if we could focus on the street facing bits. And the other thing I do have trouble with, if we're serious about it, or we care about, is wherever possible, is really mouth. I mean, well, I'm a developer, and, no, it's not possible, I can't do it, It's because I can't do it, and I'll come up with a million reasons. I don't know if that's needed. We've used other language like undue hardships and things, like you really can't do it, but wherever possible sounds like you're starting with, you can get out of this pretty easily.
Yeah,
So-
that's, sorry, can I respond to that really quickly? Just, so I think with specifically service areas and drive-through areas and parking areas, there's already other sections that are stronger that would prohibit that without a waiver or variance in some cases. Mechanical equipment is probably the one here where it's not a hard and fast rule, and I think that's a good thing. Just because there are times when, like, due to just the feasibility and technical constraints, it may have to be located on a street-facing facade. I'm especially thinking like in the downtown where some parcels have 3 street-facing facades, or, you know, so it makes it harder for those properties. So honestly, of that list, the only one that would actually be subject to the wherever possible is just the mechanical equipment.
Counselor Remy?
Thank you. So I only see 2 places in this chapter where we call something else a primary entrance. And one of them is, to your point, like, it says waste collection, waste compaction, recycling collection, and other similar service areas shall not be located along the business frontage, building frontage, or along a building facade with a primary entrance, and shall be screened from view from adjacent property. It seems like it's pretty clearly trying to, so this is 26.2A1. It's also in 26.2B1. Talking about drive-through businesses, drive-through windows and lanes shall not be located along the building frontage or along a building facade with a primary entrance. And both of them seem to try to clearly differentiate between frontage and primary entrance and say that the frontage is one thing, the building facade with a primary entrance is another thing, and you can't do it on either. So I think if we want to go after this and say that we only care about frontage or street-facing points of ingress, then we need a broader change than just inserting that, because these are pretty clearly trying to say that if there's a main entrance, whatever main entrance is, that we don't want this stuff near it.
Yeah, I sort of interpreted that slightly differently, where when we talk about frontage, we always identify one frontage, and then you might have a street-facing facade that's technically not the frontage, it's like the side of the lot technically. So that's kind of where I thought that was going, but I definitely think it could be either way that you look at it. And that's where I think
Yeah, any
clarification.
gray like that is where we get in trouble with
Yeah.
friends that come in and try to figure out ways to get around it.
And the way the planning, at the time that 310 Marlborough Street came through, the way the planning board interpreted it was that the dumpster could be next to that door without a waiver because they didn't feel like that door was a primary entrance. And so that's sort of where I took my cue for this.
So that building, the primary entrance is right along the street, and that is a residence-only entrance, and that's a big main entrance in the front, right on the main street. And that's why I think that is different, that the main entrance is there. This is a resident-only access. So, yeah.
Mr. Hafer?
Thank you. Yes, is there do we have a list of definitions that go along with this stuff versus building this into a section E, like very short definition? Primary entrances are the principal entrances to a building utilized for day-to-day pedestrian ingress and egress. Other entrances solely used for freight, service, emergency egress shall not constitute a primary entrance. Like it feels like a lot of words to describe what, I'm reading your goal, add a new section, and to clarify the definition of primary entrance, why can't we just describe primary entrance someplace and then leave it the same as it is today?
Yeah, we discussed that possibility, and I think there's one other location in the land development code where the term primary entrance is used, and we didn't want to accidentally cause complications elsewhere in the code by creating a definition that's code-wide that might conflict with what they meant in that section, if that makes sense. So we do have a list of definitions at the end of the LDC that's,
Yeah.
those are like universal definitions that apply throughout.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is it-
I think we could change this to street-facing entrances along a street. I think really the intent here was just to try and get some clarity. So,
I don't,
other place is 1999.
Yeah. I'm not sure. You think about it much more, Murray, so I trust you, but it feels like it's adding confusion versus clearing it up maybe. And if this is an issue that comes before you, multiple times a year, does it need to be fixed, I guess?
Yes, it comes before us every time we do a site plan review. Because every
Someone doesn't know
time,
what a primary entrance is every time we do a site plan review?
well, we have to look at every site. So for any new building, when staff does their review, we go through our development standards to make sure it meets all of them. And so we will look to see, you know, where is the dumpster located? Now, normally they locate the dumpster sort of in the back of the parcel, so it doesn't usually come up. But there have been instances where it's come up and we've asked them to move it. It also has come up with drive-throughs. I don't know if you remember Aroma Joe's, they wanted to do like a lane in front, and there was discussion about, is that a drive-through lane or not? Yeah, so it does come up. I think it would be good to clarify it either way, but I'm definitely open to, you know, however you think would be most clear, we can do that.
Counselor Remy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Maybe it's,
I think it would be easier just to strike or along a building facade with a primary entrance from 21.62A1 or where, so it would just say waste collection, waste compaction. If our intent is to say that we don't care as long as it's not along the frontage, then waste collection, waste compaction, recycling collection, and other similar service areas shall not be located along the building frontage and shall be screened from view from adjacent property or public rights of way, not including alleys. And it would remove a section where it says, and along a building facade with a primary entrance, and just strike that out of there. And that would be one way to handle it. Same with drive-through business, drive-through windows and lanes shall not be located along the building frontage. That'd be the end of the sentence. And it would bring us back to, instead of saying or along a building facade with a primary entrance. And that would accomplish, I think, what you're trying to get to. It would eliminate the language from here where you need to define primary entrance because it wouldn't exist anymore in this section. If our intent is to say we're okay with that, then I think that's the right way. Instead of creating new language to define something only in part of the code.
I think that would be cleaner.
It just depends on if we're okay with that. If we as a group are okay with the idea of, we don't care about having, it really is only referenced in form of waste collection in areas and drive-throughs. If we're okay with a primary entrance having those things near it that isn't along the frontage, then that would be my recommended change.
Mr.
Thank you.
Hafer?
thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm thinking of, let's think of a fictional fast food place that might be modeled after the one we have, McDonald's now. Their primary entrance is off that parking lot. We wouldn't want them to have a drive-through directly neighbor right behind that, right? So I think there's some safety issues here too. It's not just about, right, we're not just worried about looks, we're worried about pedestrian safety and good layout, and maybe that's where the Aroma Joe's, I can see that being a challenging thing where there's windows on both sides there. So I guess I'm not sure about the front-facing bits. I think primary entrance shall mean main points of ingress and egress. To me, like, yeah.
Well,
Is that, are
We
we
wouldn't-
sort
we
of
wouldn't need
not
to
matching
define
on
it.
that? What's that?
if we went with Counselor Remy's idea, we wouldn't need to define primary entrance.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, in my world, I would strike it from the code where it exists, except for that one in section 9, which I haven't read through to figure out what it is. Or what it's referenced, it's like remote parking or something. It's the distance where a remote parking lot can be from the entrance of the building and how far away it can be. Which I think also requires the same entrance for principal and primary entrance. But the intent of this, I think, is pretty clear that it meant to be where most people go in and out of a building. I think that's the clear intent of what this meant to be, whether that's on the front or the side or the back or whatever. And
Okay.
if we're saying that we're okay with it not being restricted, then I think we strike it. If we don't want it, if we do want it restricted, we do want to say that we don't want drive-throughs there and we don't want trash cans there, then I think this is the wrong definition. And to your point, it needs to change to say, for the purpose of this section, primary entrance shall mean the entrance where
Just get rid of front.
like unaware patrons would enter and exit the building, right? Like somebody who just wears the big sign. Like, to some extent, it goes to a more general concept
Yeah.
and say, yeah, I don't want them near the main entrance regardless of what side of the building it's on.
In that case, I would recommend just saying service areas, strike wherever possible, and just say service areas and drive-through windows and lanes shall not be located adjacent to a primary entrance for the purposes of this section. Primary entrance shall mean the main point of ingress or egress for pedestrians entering the building. Or
I like
patrons
that.
entering, I don't know.
Yeah, I think
People
we're
entering
aligned
the
on the
building.
definition. I think we might disagree on which way we want to go with it. I'm okay with taking it out and just saying like, we'll figure it out. But I think I get your point of like the safety issue on the drive-throughs. We gotta be careful of that. But I think that's where I think it'll come to a poll for the board of like, which way we'd want to go with that, because I think we understand both pieces. I think most people understand both pieces. It's like either you want it or you don't, and there's not a right answer to that. So, it's whatever people want.
Would it be appropriate, Mr. Chair, to take a quick straw poll?
Sure.
So how many of you right now are leaning towards just striking primary entrance from this altogether and just talking about the frontage?
So saying that, I'm just gonna rephrase it a little bit. How many people want to allow service areas and drive-through windows and lanes to only be restricted from the front?
Yeah.
And the alternative vote is to say that they are restricted from the front and primary entrances.
Yes. So right now, how many of you want to remove primary entrance and say that you can have dumpsters and drive-through lanes next to a main entrance to a building?
Can I ask, when you say front, that you meaning street frontage?
Street front, yes.
Which is what's already in the code.
Yeah.
Street
Building
facing.
frontage is already in the code separately.
Is anybody in favor? Okay, so
I'm okay with.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm voting for a street-facing
Only.
version, yeah.
okay, so we've got 3, and then I assume that means the other one, do the other of you care? Or does everyone else think
No.
that the main entrance shouldn't have a drive-through or a dumpster next to it?
Yes, I think, to me, the spirit is you don't want a drive-through right next to your main door in and out of your fast food shop.
And I'd agree.
So I think we need to somehow keep primary entrance. I'd almost give up the front and street facing instead of, if you had to. But I understand the architectural concerns and quality of viewscape concerns there, but the primary entrance is important to protect as well. As important as the front and street facing is, I think.
And I guess for Ryan and Joey, do you have a preference at this point, or?
Ms.
Thank you.
Clancy.
I'm just trying to figure, is this section for staff purposes or for our purposes? And
It's your site development
Yes.
standard. So when you're doing site plan review and you're reviewing for screening, this is one of your requirements.
yes, well, I'm just trying, and does it need to be defined here? Or with what Counselor Remy's saying, defining it in the alternative spots?
We could define it in the definition section. I would just have to look at that other section of the code where it uses that term to make sure it won't mess with anything. Because I haven't actually looked at it other than to do a quick word search to see if that term actually ever shows up anywhere else.
It actually is a clean match. It's saying that it needs to be within 1,000, right? It needs to be within 1,000 walking distance. A remote parking spot for a building needs to be within 1,000 feet walking distance from the property where the principal use is located. The distance is measured from the nearest point of the remote parking area to the primary entrance of the use served.
Okay, so yeah, that makes sense.
It's the same definition
Yeah.
of primary entrance, is where do most people go in and out?
Mr. Cost?
So, I was just thinking of a shopping center in like Hannaford's, right? And it's parking, there's lots of parking by the main entrance. And it's hazardous can be. I mean, you gotta park, you gotta back out, you gotta not run people over when they're crossing. This can't do anything about that, right? I mean, that's the only way to design those things, so is, probably. So when we say no parking by the primary entrance, is that even like
Ye-
something doable?
So that's why if
The
we are
whereas
going
clause.
to keep primary entrance and have it mean the main entrance into the building that most people use, I would just keep it to service areas and drive-through windows and lanes and remove the other items. Right now in the code, it already says that you can't have parking between the building and the street, essentially. It has to be either to the side or behind the building. So that's why I added the parking in there, because it's already, in this, what we have on the screen, it's talking about a street-facing facade.
Right, okay.
If we change it to just mean the main entrance, I would remove parking. I would also remove mechanical equipment and just keep it to the service areas, drive-through windows and lanes.
Okay. Well, that's why I like the street facing, because it's the one that sort of we can control.
Yeah. If I was going to, so if we went with the way of like, we're okay with it, I would strike this whole language and then just strike the other piece from the other areas, and then it would just basically say that the existing code stands except for those pieces. But I get the argument of like a drive-through specifically, like having it go by the main pedestrian entrance into a business is not ideal. But I think, I'm trying to think of one in town where it doesn't.
Most of them don't, so,
Wendy's would, or that would, the one for Tito's wraps around the building.
okay, so this is how, the drive-through lane, I guess it depends on how you define the drive-through lane. So I'm
'Cause-
thinking of like the Burger King and the Tito's building. I'm not considering the part that goes by the entrance to be a drive-through lane. That's a
McDonald's is
drive
the same.
aisle in the parking lot. The drive-through lane is the lane that's just for the cars to go around and has the window and the menu boards and the microphones for people to talk into. The parking lot area,
Then in that definition, none of them have it in front. Even McDonald's is only in the back technically there. There is a door there, but
Right.
there's,
Oh, sure, yeah. But we wouldn't want a new fast food place saying we want the drive-in window right next to their door, I guess.
yeah.
That's sort of what my use case I'm thinking about is in the future, a new building. I'm not worried about the existing one there, but we wouldn't want code that would encourage someone to put that's where the squawk box and the menu board is.
Then I would recommend we strike this and we define primary entrance in the code and put it in the definitions as the main entrance where people go in and out of the building, because it applies to both this section and to section 9 pretty cleanly. And that way we're not putting a drive-through right there. It also would restrict having dumpsters right there. But even in the example of 310, that wasn't the primary entrance, was the reason we eventually made the decision to do it that way, is the primary entrance was on the other side. That was residents only.
so that is great. So we can just remove this entirely from the planning board's changes, and then we can add the definition to the definition section, which is technically not in your purview, but we'll be bringing an ordinance forward to city council, and we'll include it in that. Does that work for everyone?
I like it.
Sweet, okay, thank you for your input on that, that was extremely helpful.
We made it through 2 in 45
Yeah,
minutes.
2 out of 18.
All right,
That's helpful.
moving on. Number 3 is to amend the earth excavation regulations, and this is really just to reflect a vote that you've already taken. So you, at your meeting several months ago, voted to delegate enforcement authority to staff, and this is just codifying it. Questions?
Great.
Perfect.
Did it say 7 copies were required before?
So we have never, that changed with COVID. So number 4, yes, the code still says that we require 7 full-size copies. The reason is that the way we used to do things is we would interdepartmentally mail the copies of the plans to the various departments that review them. And yeah, so COVID put an end to that. We haven't done this in practice since 2020. And whenever applicants bring in 7 copies, we're always like, oh, so sorry, you didn't have to do that. So I think that this is just, we use digital copies now. Yeah. That's the main thing. And the other thing is that sometimes we'll get PDF files that are just massive with all these different layers turned on and all the comments, and it makes my computer crash. So we're saying a flattened PDF file, which is also a best practice because it means that we can't accidentally
Turn off a layer.
tamper with their plan or turn off a layer, exactly. So it's just a good practice. And so that would be for both the site plan and the subdivision, we would only require 2 copies.
I'm good with all this. Where do Mylars come in? I remember we asked for Mylars on certain things. Do we still ask for Mylars?
Yes, but that is not in the submittal requirements, it's in the filing requirements at the end of the process,
Okay.
because the Mylars don't have to be submitted until everything is final and approved.
Okay.
And that's for recording. They need 1 copy to record and 1 copy that we send to Public Works, because those are much more durable and hold up over time.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so those 2 are fast. So number 5, this is another submittal requirements one. This was actually a request from one of the planners, because they often have to request this information, and they would prefer that it's just in the submittal requirements, so that when folks are going through, they know that we are going to need the zoning information on the plan. It's usually pretty standard that people will put a table on the plan that says, here's the zoning requirements, here's how we meet them. And it's really helpful when you're reviewing to just do a quick check. And it's also very helpful for applicants in making this, because then they might catch something and realize, oh, I have to modify this design or request a variance or whatever. So we are finding that we have to occasionally ask for this, and it would just be easier to put it in there as a requirement.
What if they get it wrong? They're just pulling it from our code? I just get nervous that somebody's gonna put in the wrong numbers and then.
Well, we do have a zoning review of all of the applications, but it's easier to start with, I mean, usually when somebody submits like a subdivision plan, we're not calculating the lot area. We're relying on the surveyor to calculate the lot area for us. But we can definitely check to make sure that they got the right number from our zoning code. We're not checking the lot area. We're relying on their surveyor to
Yeah.
give us the right number.
I'm fine with it, I just,
And this is about, sorry, Mr. Chair, are we permitted for sort of free,
Go ahead, Mr. Hafer.
free discussions here? Thank you.
I was trying to save your voice, I just kept going.
This is about lot sizes and thing, not bedrooms or bathrooms, or this is just the
No,
big, the
yeah.
big things of, you know, this is what's allowed in commercial, and we're changing it to this, so it's great.
Yeah, the zone dimensional requirements typically include the lot size, frontage, the lot width at the building line, setbacks, impervious coverage, building height.
You've already impressed me, so.
Yeah, I can't think of it. I'm sure I've missed something, but those are the main things. So it's really just
Yeah,
compare the
big things,
numbers, make
yeah.
sure they meet everything, and it's, yeah. Number 6 is one that I'm really excited about, because this is just a weird thing. So basically, in your application procedures, applicants have the ability to request an exemption from a submittal requirement, but everything else they have to request a waiver. We have a requirement for just boundary line adjustments, that in the filing section, which is not in submittal requirements, that they have to submit an updated survey showing the meets and bounds of the revised parcels. And so it's weird, because if, let's say, one lot is 50 acres and the other lot is a quarter of an acre, you know, and they're just adjusting the lot line between them, all we really need to see is the meets and bounds for anything that's changing. And the expense of surveying that full 50-acre lot is prohibitively expensive. So what we're finding is that applicants want to request an exemption, They technically can't because this isn't in the submittal requirements. So we just want to make it clear here that it's just the portions of the parcel boundaries that are changing that we need the information for. Okay, great. All right, so this one is one of the changes that was necessitated by a change to state law. HB 413, which was signed into law and actually is retroactively effective, so it applies to anything from July 1st, 2023 forward. Basically just changed the timeframe for active and substantial development to be 3 years instead of 2. And then substantial completion went from 5 years to 7 years. So basically what that means is that once an applicant gets final approval from you, they have 3 years to start the project and then 7 years to complete the project. And if they meet those, then their rights are vested. Future changes to zoning or subdivision or site plan won't impact them. Our current code refers to 2 years. And so this is just updating it to refer to 3. And then we also wanted to clarify, because it currently states within 2 years, starting the day following the board's decision to approve or conditionally approve. Now that the board always does a vote on final approval, we wanted to make it clear that it's the vote on the final approval that starts these clocks.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Mr. Cost?
Just for, what is the reason to go from 2 to 3 years? It's,
State law.
oh, it's a state law.
State law
Yeah, the
changed it.
state preempted us
All
here,
right,
but I
that's
believe the
enough.
reasoning was to be,
That's the short answer.
yeah. I mean, but the rationale was really that with the cost of development going up so much and all of the economic uncertainty recently, it's taking a lot longer to do projects. And I think we've seen that just here in Keene, where we've seen a lot more extension requests than we have in the past. So I think they're reacting to the reality of development right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
So this one is to add a new section D called substantial completion. And so the reason for this is that currently we don't define what substantial completion means. And so we've had that question come up before, and so we thought it would be helpful to include something so that it's clear, kind of cut and dry what it means. I basically combed through other communities' definitions and stole them. So this is plagiarized. But it's basically the same language at the top as the active and substantial development, but then the items for substantial completion, roadways would be installed and paved through the base course, and then it doesn't necessarily have to be accepted by city council, but it has to meet the conditions for acceptance, which would be determined by the public works director. And then the utilities have to be installed and ready for hookup. Lot monuments, driveways, other site features are installed or completed. All the permanent on-site stormwater management, erosion control, et cetera, are installed. Buildings and structures, off-site improvements if they are required. So this does leave some leeway for we've had some situations where everything's installed except for the bike rack and the gate on their dumpster enclosure because they're waiting for the materials to get delivered. I don't think something like that would hold up substantial completion. This is really about the hard infrastructure and the major site features being installed.
Mr. Cost?
So this is about phases, so like a 3-phase project, here, I'm gonna do this first, second, third. So my first phase, I could leave the phase 2 and 3 just land, don't do anything to them, right? And the first phase has to meet all of these conditions?
Yeah, so in the case of a phased plan.
Because the word phased is up on top here.
Yep, so probably like 90% of the plans that you approve are not in phases. So this would just be one determination. In the case where there are phases, you actually have leeway to determine what the timeframe for active and substantial development will be for the subsequent phases. And so then substantial development would be based off of that timeframe that was set by the board.
Our version in the packet is different than what you're showing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, number 3 doesn't exist in our packets, and we have a different, it's shifted up, and number 5 includes all major on-site improvements shown on the approved plan, including landscaping, lighting, screening, on-site pedestrian, bicycle infrastructure, and parking areas are completed. Unless I'm in a different section. Oh, I'm off by one.
Yeah,
I'm off by, it's a me problem, not a you problem. I'm on the next one.
They look the
Oh,
same.
yeah, because it's very similar. So this is for the subdivision, and then the next one that you were just looking at is for site plan.
But that one does include bike infrastructure. That's why I picked it up, because you happen to have the
Oh.
example that you used of not having a bike rack installed. This one does not.
Oh, yeah.
This is,
I generally am fine with it. I think the only thing you want to make sure that we're accounting for is that sometimes there are staff amendments to the plan that are approved that don't need to come back to planning board. Right, there are things, small things that are changed after the fact, and this doesn't at least seem to contemplate that. It says that it has to meet what was approved. And maybe doesn't include those as, or appropriately amended by staff for minor site plan changes. But maybe that is currently covered.
Yeah, I guess that didn't occur to me, but I'm not sure that would be an issue because we would hold them to whatever the most recent approved version of the plan is. If an applicant wants to modify their plan before they've gotten final approval, we make them come back to the board. So,
This would be after final approval, after you started construction, I was gonna have the driveway go this way, now I'm gonna have it go this way, it doesn't really affect anything, staff goes, yeah, it's fine.
yeah, so we would hold them to whatever the most recent plan was, yeah.
Then I'm good with this one.
And Mary, just remind me, this would be compliance that would be checking these? I mean, the planning board doesn't go audit.
Not the planning board, so planning staff go out and do
Planning staff
inspections.
does,
Yep.
okay.
So it's kind of like built into actually the building inspections. We do inspections at certain points during construction. There's a pre and post landscaping inspection that's done. And then we probably won't do inspections for substantial completion, to be honest, unless we're concerned that a project isn't, like normally a project would be built well before the deadline for
Right.
substantial completion. But in a case where a project isn't being built and it's just sitting there, I think that's the only time where we might go out.
Okay.
Yeah, so really the entire intent behind the substantial completion was just to give developers some guidance about what that means.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Mr.
just
Hafer.
Back to, almost to Mike's point, the very first item, of the topics tonight, the idea of defining this multiple times within the same document sort of just goes against my software programming thing, where you just want one definition of what this means and you refer to that one versus having to multiple times in the document. So is there a reason why you need to mention all that stuff twice, I guess? I don't know the term of art or the requirements of the document, but again, to me, it feels like there should be a definition of what substantial completion is, and then all sections refer to that definition versus having to define it multiple times throughout the code.
Yeah, so the active and substantial development and substantial completion are specific to whether it's a site plan or subdivision. You could come up with one definition for both. There are some slight differences, like for a subdivision, it includes the lot monuments. for site plans. It includes some other site features that you wouldn't normally see in a subdivision. Those are slightly, they're minor differences, so I could see us, you creating one definition if you wanted to. I just kind of followed the current format, so right now, active and substantial development is defined within both the subdivision regulations and the site development regulations, and so I just
Got it.
followed that, but I think you could come up with just one definition if you wanted to be consistent across both.
So section 2610 11C is a different than 2612 11C?
Yeah, so 2610 are your subdivision application
Got it.
procedures, and 2612 are your site plan application procedures. Ken?
There is. there
Mr.
is-
Cost.
Thank you. There is, to me, an idea of using a document that if I'm doing a subdivision or a site plan, I only care about, say, subdivision, because that's what I'm focused on. So I want to go to subdivision place and see the things that apply to subdivision. If I go to subdivision and then it refers me back over somewhere else where something else is held, that gets sort of frustrating. So, I mean, in a way, I understand it's repeating it kind of, but, this isn't, for a user, I think it's probably easier to say, everything I need to know about mostly for subdivisions is gonna be my subdivision section. I don't have to now refer to some other list of other things. So I think for user friendliness, it makes sense the way it's structured.
Does anybody else have an opinion?
I mean, you could republish this every 6 months, and then a developer would say, this is
Right.
not easy to navigate. So I don't know. That's your call as to how often you update it just for navigation.
Yeah, and if the differences between subdivision and major site are different enough that it warrants two different definitions, I think how you've done it is great.
Okay.
So,
Okay, I'll go on, did we want to talk about 9, or do you feel like we've covered this? This is the
Yeah.
definition of substantial completion for site plans?
difference 5.
Yeah. And it doesn't include the lot monuments.
Yeah. Deletes that and adds in, you gotta put in your bike rack.
so as long as that's as you intended, right? You intended it to be different between the two?
Yes,
Alright,
yep,
okay,
yeah.
great.
Yeah. Because normally with site plans, you're gonna have required landscaping, required lighting, required, if you have to put in walkways, or we want to make sure that's all installed.
So
Mr.
the
Cost.
logic of all that, a subdivision is a larger development where you want to make sure the roads and utilities and the infrastructure are in, and then maybe builders would build houses or build something, or manufacturing buildings in that subdivision, right? So that's why you don't care about bike racks so much. But if it's a site plan, that's, I guess, could be a smaller scale, but generally you want that more complete, right?
Yes,
Is that
and
sort of the logic of why it's different?
yes, exactly. So the subdivision regulations don't necessarily require lighting, screening, in certain circumstances, but usually it's just creating lots, and then the development comes later.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Got it.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. So these are the site plan review thresholds that we reviewed last month. I did make some of the change, actually, I think there's only one change, if I recall correctly, from last month. which was to split out the additions between downtown districts and all other districts. So this doesn't go through exactly how it's shown in the memo, but I thought it might be easy to see them side by side. So the site plan review thresholds right now for a new principal building or structure is greater than 5,000 square feet of gross floor area is major site plan, between 1,000 and 5,000 is minor site plan. And then for additions, in the downtown district, it'll basically stay what it is today, which is anything greater than 15% of the gross floor area of the principal building would be a major site plan, between 10 and 15 would be a minor site plan. But then outside of the downtown districts, that threshold would be raised up a little bit to hopefully increase the number of projects that can go to minor project review committee. Okay.
Yep, I think that reflects what we said last month.
So new residential units, 25 or more, would go to major site plan, between 10 to 24 would go to minor site plan. Vehicle trips is increase of 100 per day or 50 per peak hour would be major site plan, which is what it is today. New impervious surfaces is again what it is today. Didn't propose any changes to that. Land disturbance, didn't propose any change. The street access, though, is a new proposal. So right now, pretty much all street access we send to the planning board, and we want to have the flexibility to send some of those to the minor project review committee, or in instances where they're removing a street access or narrowing it, maybe even reviewing administratively. And so what we're proposing is that anytime an exception is requested from the street access standards, that kicks it up to planning board. But if they're meeting all of the street access requirements, they can go to minor project review committee if they're creating a new driveway or they're widening an existing driveway, but they're still staying within the requirements, they can go to minor project. And then if they're reducing the number of curb cuts or narrowing them, it could be reviewed administratively, with the caveat that we would have the city engineer review it as well. Okay.
Mr. Cost?
I still have a question about the acre thing, the land disturbance of an acre. I keep going back to downtown. An acre is huge downtown. I mean, it's really big. And so 0.9 of an acre is really big. And, I mean, I'm just thinking, say somebody wants to develop, I don't know, a tire dealership that happens to be downtown into something. That's maybe, I don't know, half an acre, something like that. So that would not go to planning board, even though it's on Main Street, it's downtown. And then you guys made me comfortable because form-based code would kick in and save the day. But I'm still confused that we don't see anything big like half an acre, 3/4 of an acre right downtown. Because it's a big impact, it's a huge impact.
Yeah, so with these thresholds, a project that meets any one of these, so it's whatever, like if you met any of the thresholds under major site plan, you would have to go through major site plan. Same thing with minor projects. So, and the example that you provided of the tire warehouse, let me go back up. Sorry, not tire, sorry. The, what you said, I can't remember what you said. If they've met, any of these, 10,000 square feet or more of new impervious surfaces, the vehicle trips. And then there's also, if we go down here, modifications to the building or site, such as facade alteration, landscaping, or lighting, that's basically at the discretion of the community development director to say, yeah, this warrants review by the planning board. And also change of use is another sort of catch-all. So there's two opportunities for staff to use some discretion and push things to the planning board. Usually what we do in those situations is we'll email Harold or call him as the planning board chair and be like, hey, what do you think? Just to get another opinion on it. But we tend to be pretty cautious. Like if we get something that we're like, yeah, we think the planning board would want to see this, we'll tell them like, hey, we think this needs to go to planning board. And if they push back on it, we'll say, okay, well, why don't you go to them for advice and comment? And then they can tell you if they want to review it or not. And that's worked pretty well in the past. So I don't know if that addresses your concerns, but that is there as a kind of fallback if they don't meet any of the other thresholds, but we kind of know that there would be a big interest from the community.
Yeah, because there is a tire place right on Main Street. But it is a tire place. If another tire place bought that and decided to keep it as a tire place, you know, I don't know why they'd have to go through major site plan
No, that's what I-
unless they, you know, tripped one of these other thresholds.
Yeah, my example was
But
if
if you
they
take
decide to,
Log
don't
and
wanna sell-
logger and turn it into a,
we don't want to sell
tire
tires
place,
anymore,
then
we're going to
that's
sell the business, and someone
site
buys the
plan
property
review.
and they want to build something there, you know, a three-story something building or housing, and it's a half an acre, it doesn't have to come to the planning board,
Well, except, I mean,
except,
this.
at the
modifica-
discretion.
Yes.
Again, yeah, if they meet
am I just
any of,
missing the, I don't know, it just
yeah, I
seems-
think so. I think there's plenty of tripwires here that would set off a major site plan review.
It feels like,
Counselor Remy?
Yeah, if it, in order to not come before us, it would have to meet form-based code. It couldn't be an addition of more than 10% or 10 to 15% of the site, the existing site. It couldn't be a new building of more than 5,000 square feet. It couldn't affect impervious surfaces by more than that much, the 10,000 square feet. To your point, the land acre disturbance one is not for downtown. The downtown is where the square footage is gonna come into play. Downtown, you're not gonna disturb an acre, to your point, like, that's not realistically for downtown. But for out in rural district, if somebody was gonna dig up an acre and do something, then that's where there's a line of like, okay, that's the line we're choosing to draw. My lot in downtown, it'd be 3 times the size of the lot, right, to hit the threshold, but it's really about the square footage here, and you'd have to meet form-based code. So if they wanted to turn the tire place into a 6-story residential, if it met form-based code and didn't require this, and didn't add more than 24 units, then it wouldn't have to come to us, you're right. But the odds of that happening are slim. But if it did happen, I'm okay with it. They've met all the things we've put out for them, and we put a gauntlet out there to say, here's all the things that would trigger it.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
it feels a little bit like you're worried about a lenient CDD director, and I'm counting on I don't know the right word,
Fear of reprisal.
a person in that role that's going to understand when the planning board needs to be involved with things. So I think maybe you're trying to protect against somebody who just said, yeah, that's fine, it's at my discretion, you don't need to come here.
Yeah, I don't
And
like.
I'm saying,
yeah.
I'm thinking of it the other way, I'm thinking, okay, if it's these gray cases, we're gonna see it because the planning staff know the nature of the town and, the
As
people.
long as everyone feels that downtown is protected and things, so say there is a different planning, a different
CDD.
director, or
Mm.
CDD director who says, oh, yeah, you know, do whatever you want, I don't care. It just seems, just that downtown is just to me so sacred, and, you know, I would hate to see any way to weasel through and not have it be looked at by the planning board. So, but it sounds like
They
we're
wouldn't be
covered.
employed here very long if that happened.
I know, but something could happen. meanwhile.
Yeah, and Mary will call me anyway, and then we'll bring it here, so.
yeah, and I will say, one other layer of protection for the downtown, at least for historic buildings, is the Historic District Commission. So you can't demolish a historic building that's been ranked as contributing or primary unless you meet really specific conditions, like your building burned down.
Yeah, but like Ted's and Athens and the
Yep.
whole block with, you know, where what is it, the resale antique store is, and Thai Garden, none of those are historic. I don't think the tire store is historic. So, there's lots of stuff that, and it says those are not historic, and so those wouldn't even come in the purview of that.
Yeah, so the historic district only applies to buildings that are 50 years or
Yeah.
older and are ranked as contributing or primary. I believe there are some buildings down there that are older than you would think and fit the age, but then they're not ranked as primary or contributing. So if they could be demolished, but then what gets rebuilt there would most likely end up coming to planning board unless it's a pretty like cut and dry, not a huge building, meets all of the form-based code. But yeah, I think most development downtown is probably going to end up at planning board realistically.
Then I'm probably okay.
Okay. I'm trying to think of a situation where it might not happen. I think the biggest situation where we might not send something to the planning board is where someone's doing like an adaptive reuse of an existing downtown building, where maybe they have offices on the second and third floor and they're converting them to apartments, but the uses on the bottom floor are staying the same. You know, the community's experience of the building isn't really changing in that respect, so we probably wouldn't send that to you unless it met one of these thresholds.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right, cool.
Yeah, and to Mary's point, I think McDonald's is 50 years old already, isn't it?
Okay.
I don't know.
It's gotta be
Definitely here
close.
when I was in high school.
Yeah, it's just close.
Wow, the McDonald's was here when you were in high school? Wow,
I think so, yeah.
okay. All right, so that's the end of the site plan review thresholds.
Good.
Okay. Number 11 is this is basically to give the minor project review committee a little explicit authorization to refer projects when things come before them that doesn't meet zoning, or if they find out partway through the process that they need a waiver or something like that, that it kind of puts developers on notice as well as the minor project review committee members that they then can refer the project to the appropriate board. They would have to do that anyways, because if it doesn't meet zoning or if it requires a waiver, it's not within their jurisdiction. But it's just language to help clarify that. Seemed like a good best practice. Number 12 is basically to specify that final plans need to include all professional stamps for anyone who helps prepare the plan. That's something that we require today. This is just making sure that our code reflects that. It's required in our submittal requirements, but not in our filing requirements, and so we're just restating it in the filing. So these are the final plans that they submit at the very end that either get recorded or are filed as the final approved site plan. Any questions on that one? Okay. Number 13 is basically to require the submittal of a flattened PDF copy of as-built plans in addition to the paper and electronic file formats, and to specify the number of paper copies. Yeah, so right now what we do, they submit an as-built plan, we keep one paper copy with our department, we send one paper copy to Public Works. Planning staff will do a review of the PDF to make sure that it reflects what is supposed to be there, and then engineering does a more detailed review of the actual electronic file that they submit to look at, and all of the specifications, especially what they're really concerned about is where it interacts with the public utilities and right-of-way. And so this is just clarifying that we need that PDF file as well as the paper and the geodatabase file. Okay. Number 14, this is a funny one. So right now, this is our conditional use permit application procedures. And right now, basically, it says that applicants for a conditional use permit that are seeking a waiver from conditional use permit standards shall apply to the zoning board of adjustment for a variance. However, in the telecommunications CUP, there's actually built into that a process for the planning board to issue a waiver. And so we just wanted to put, unless otherwise specified in this LDC, this is the process you have to follow, because there is that one instance where the planning board has been authorized to grant waivers. So that's kind of a weird one. The 15 and 16 are, we're proposing to remove the requirement from both the subdivision regulations and the site plan regulations that waivers must follow the same process as the application. So what this means today is that if we're, so, you know, an applicant submits their application and staff is doing a review, it's a pretty tight timeline. We have a goal to get applications through in one planning board meeting whenever possible, because that is much more development friendly. And if we're going through the review and we realize that they needed a waiver and we find that out too late in the process, then that delays the application, because now they have to notice the waiver within the required noticing timeframe in state statute, which comes out to 14 days before the meeting. So we're proposing that, you know, any waivers that are identified up front and that we know about, we would still include in the legal ad language. But if a waiver is required and we discover that after the legal ad goes out, or if it's discovered during the planning board meeting, because that has happened before, you could still have the ability to weigh whether or not to grant a waiver without having them go through the notice process. And I should mention, this is specifically a Keene thing. I don't think that other communities require waivers to be noticed the way that we do. So that's what we're proposing, because it would just make it a lot easier for developers when things are identified partway through the process. And reduce the cost, because when they have to do a whole round of noticing just for a waiver, that means they have to do the legal ad fee again and the abutter notice fee again.
Counselor Remy.
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I would suggest is that we make it so in the language that they're putting in for the noticing, that they say that waivers may be requested, exempting us from conditions of the, like, there's some generalized language that they include in the noticing language to say that this may not include waivers, because taking this out, what I worry about is people that are very used to the fact that, well, they must be meeting all conditions, they're not requesting any waivers because it's not in the thing anymore. I don't know that anyone pays that much attention, but we should assume that our public is reading every bit of every waiver that goes out, and they know what's in there and they're paying attention to it, because some do. I wish more did. And yeah, I think if you're gonna take this out and people may be used to it, that we should have some generic language that say waivers from requirements may be requested at the, up until the meeting. So that people know, they, I don't know, if they kinda care about it, they should go to the meeting.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we have pretty good language that we use for public workshops for ordinances, where we make it very clear, like, please be aware that
Modifications could occur.
that during the workshop phase, this could be amended, so please follow along. So I think that we could take that and adapt it for these notices. We usually put that in the abutter letters, because we have a lot more space to work with in those, whereas the legal ad in the paper, we pay per line, so we try to, like, make it very concise.
Frankly, as long as the abutters know, I think that meets my, like, concern around it, is the people that are gonna be most impacted know. Because they might just do the research, and then something, like, if they feel like we pulled the rug out on them, if we granted a bunch of waivers at the meeting they didn't know was an option.
Yeah. And again, I think that we will continue to include any waivers that
we
are
know about.
requested that we know about ahead of time. It's just, like, probably once out of every 10 applications this happens, where it delays it by a month,
Yeah.
and it's always a big hassle.
Could it disincentivize applicants to giving you the waivers on time, though?
I don't think so, but maybe. I mean,
They could give
the
you last
staff
minute,
will
you have
catch
no
them
time to
though.
prepare, But you, staff would have no time to prepare, and we're already scheduled for the meeting, and there's nothing you can do to push them back, because there's nothing in the code that says you have the right to push them back, because they didn't have to put them on the same timeline.
So staff does an initial determination of completeness, and then we do a more thorough review, and we send them a memo of comments, and they have a revision deadline to meet that. And that's where I think we would require them to submit any outstanding, like, waivers that they haven't requested. And anytime that we don't feel like that we've gotten enough information, or that they're not ready for the public hearing, the planning board steering committee has the ability to say whether or not it goes on the agenda. So,
So should we change to say waivers requests shall be submitted by the revision deadline?
even that, though, I think, we actually talked about that internally, and I think that that still opens up the possibility that a waiver, a like inconsequential, silly waiver, like, oh, they got to 0.2 light foot candles, and they're only allowed to do 0.1 in this one spot. You know, it's just those little things that we're really worried about here.
Waiver requests shall be submitted prior to the revision meeting, except as exempted by the, what's word I'm looking for, your boss.
The community development director.
Community development director, except as exempted by the community development director. And basically say that the community development director can send it forward anyway, but it's to put in, if you guys feel in bad faith that they've been withholding waivers that they knew they were gonna ask for, it gives you the out to say, no, we gotta hold this until, because you missed the revision deadline.
Yeah, I think we already have that. So this, what I'm not showing on the screen, but I think I did include in your memo, is that there's still the requirement for them to
15's very
submit.
long, yeah.
Which section is this? 15. So yeah, 26, 10, 14, which is on page 31 of your packet. You know, lays out all, so there's a 26, 10, 14, A, B, C, D, and then this is E. So everything above it is still, would have to be met. And so we're still requiring the request to be made in writing. They have to cite the specific regulation.
They could walk into the meeting with a packet and say, here's my waiver requests.
And then the board would be well within its rights to say, well, we need more time to look at this. So I still think that, I guess, I think the vast majority of developers are acting in good faith, and they're not trying to pull anything by you. And the ones who are, you're gonna know, and you'll be able to, you have a lot of leeway in that situation.
Yeah, and that's where, like, my thought with it is basically that this gives you the out, that they could literally bring it to the meeting as long as the development director signs off. But it gives you the out to say, you're not responding, you're not being responsive, you knew you needed this and you're just not following along. Like, it gives you that leeway, but also gives you it gives the staff the option to, like, say, never mind, it's fine, just keep sending it forward. It gives you a little bit of optional teeth to say, nope, you're not responding, so you're gonna have to wait till next month. I don't know. I'm good either way. I'm fine with it, honestly, either way. I'm gonna be on planning board in a month, so I don't know.
Do you want to interpret this question? Mr. Chair, I can sort of see the reason why somebody in Keene might have inserted E. You said seemed to be a local thing, right? So if you assume good angels here, it's the fact that we want a complete plan to come before the body before we approve it. And so I can sort of see why it would be included. And at the same time, you're saying that there's these on occasion, there's waivers that come up after the fact or in the review process. So I guess as long as there's a good process up front to identify, hey, you're gonna need a parking waiver and this waiver or that waiver, like the planning staff is doing that before this happens. So as long as there's a process to really identify the big waivers that are needed ahead of time, I think I'm okay with with this, because I don't think it's gonna be a case where there's a sudden surprise, this is a whole different project, because we introduced a waiver at the last minute, and the citizens, we haven't been able, as citizens, been able to express any concerns with that. So I think, long way of saying, as long as we feel good that that process to identify the need for a waiver is happening ahead of time, and that this really is only to prevent the strange minor cases that might come up during the review process, I'm okay with this amendment.
Yeah,
Personally.
and I would just add to that, we do, so staff does a pretty thorough review. We have the pre-submission meeting where we meet with the applicant prior to submission of the application.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, there's significant changes between that point in time and when they submit. And so it's a short but pretty intensive review period. And then staff will sometimes send like a 6-page memo just of all these little things.
Yeah.
And usually where this becomes an issue is when we tell the applicant, hey, you have to revise this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. And so they're trying to accommodate all the requests that we're asking of them. And then one of those changes maybe affected the light trespass or the whatever. And it's just, they don't meet the letter of the regulations as a result of the change, but overall, we think it's a better site plan, if that makes sense. So the one that keeps sticking in my mind is I think there was, I can't remember what site this was, but there was a site that had, part of it was the lighting installation, and they had the wrong type of fixtures. They weren't using like full cutoff fixtures, and they needed to adjust everything. So they had done the whole lighting plan
Lighting
that
plan
met
with the wrong
all of our
fixture.
standards, and they did the whole table and this whole thing. And then we're like, you need to change your light fixtures. And so of course that changed everything, and they ended up having like I think it literally went from a 0.1 to a 0.2 foot candle in one area on the property boundary, which then meant that they had to request a waiver for light trespass, which meant we had to tell them, sorry, you're going to next month, and by the way, you have to pay to renotice everything. So that's more of the situation that I'm thinking of here. If somebody were to submit an incomplete application where we identify like, oh, you need this waiver and this waiver and this waiver, and it was clear from the original application that you needed those, that's probably where we would tell them, like, you need to do a full, like, revamp of your application and submit for next month. So,
I'm comfortable with these amendments.
Counselor Remy, are you good with that, or do you still want to see?
Yeah, I'm fine. We haven't had this issue here. It's been, like, I've seen in zoning is more where I've seen concerns on them, like, interpreting things in odd ways recently. But yeah, we haven't had that issue here.
Yeah, I'm good with this.
Okay. I think we're almost done here. So the last two. Number 17 is a proposal to amend the earth excavation application submittal requirements, specifically this section that refers to the exemptions. And so this is making it clear, just being more specific about what section it is where they can request exemptions from. Because it says application submittals, but then it refers to all of section 2619, which is all of the application procedures, and the submittal requirements are in a certain subsection of that. So it's just adding a little bit of specificity, because that question has come up. And then also, this is just a thing that I've noticed, it hasn't really come up as an issue, but I believe the earth excavation regulations were written quite a while ago and just have never really been used until recently. And I noticed that the section on security doesn't match all of your other sections on security. So I just wanted to update it to be consistent, because it seems to be a pretty consistent planning board policy to not accept performance bonds, and to only accept checks or letters of credit.
Counselor Remy.
Thank you. It makes sense to me, but do we care about who the letter of credit is from? like, can I write a letter of credit for $1 million bond, or does we have to, like, it just says a letter of credit? I mean, do we care that it's a organization that could
Certified
support
financial-
the, letter that they're writing?
I'm gonna be completely honest, I just copied this from the other sections of the code. I
Yeah.
kind of assumed the letter of credit could only come from a bank, so that's what I think that's the difference between the letter of credit and a performance bond, is that the letter of credit, my understanding at least, which is not great, but what I know is that it's backed by a bank, whereas a performance bond isn't necessarily backed by a bank, and that's why they're less desirable, because they're not as reliable if we had to pull it to actually do the improvements ourselves.
Yeah, it is generally, it would be generally some kind of financial institution would issue the letter of credit, and hopefully they can cover whatever it's for. That's all. So, yeah, I just didn't know if we cared if it was like from a AAA rated, whatever. It's all fine. I don't care enough on that one. I think it's gonna be okay. We don't deal with enough, like, letter of credits for earth excavation that,
I honestly, I don't know enough to comment on this, so I would have to defer to our finance department.
yeah, I think I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah, they do scrutinize these. Like, I know that in the past, the city attorney has come back and said, I don't like this, and so it gets reviewed. But not by me, so. Okay, I think that was, I did want to do really quickly, master plan consistency. This is, I think, in line with the recently adopted master plan. We do have goals under livable housing in particular, to make sure that the housing development process is transparent, easy to navigate. We're trying to boost infill development and redevelopment, remove barriers to housing development. We talk about continually improving the development approval process to be predictable, effective, and streamlined. So I think a lot of these changes are in line with that. Under the thriving economy, we have under goal 3, an action item to review the city's regulatory processes to identify potential challenges or constraints that prospective businesses and/or developers may face. And then under flourishing environment, it talks about as an aspiration, smart growth, compact, walkable development, and infill are promoted to preserve green space and farms, and adaptive reuse of buildings is the common building strategy over greenfield development. So in my mind, making sure that we're making our regulations as clear and streamlined as possible is going to help achieve that goal. Any more questions?
I think we
So
used them
I
up
did write
in real
down-
time.
I did write down some of the changes. So for number 1, we're gonna strike the beginning and just say the owner shall blah, 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 instead of referring out to Article 23. And then for number 2, we're just gonna remove that and add the definition of primary entrance to the ordinance that goes to city council.
But that wouldn't be part of what we're voting on here. We would just be removing that from our version.
Yes. Well, one of the recommendations in your recommended motions, if you think you're ready to approve this with those changes, is once you've adopted it, to send this to city council to incorporate into the land development code.
But
Yeah, but that item, yes,
would not be, because we don't have the authority to change that one.
yes.
Yeah.
And I can always, if you would rather that I bring back a revised version, I can always do that. If you want to wait,
I don't think we made that many changes. So
I don't
let's see
think
if
we
can go
did
through
either.
it.
Yeah.
So it was 1, 2, we're striking. 1, we're striking the beginning, 2, we're striking the whole thing.
Right.
3, we were
Yeah.
fine, 4, we were fine.
3, we didn't change. 4, we didn't change. 5, we didn't change. 6, 6, we didn't change. 7, we didn't change. 8, we talked about a lot, but we didn't change anything.
Right.
8 and 9. And the thresholds, I think we were okay with the thresholds, with the exception of Mr. Cost, who still has misgivings about ruining downtown.
Yeah, I'm through 14. I don't know. Yeah, I think those are the only two where we actually changed it. Is that
Yeah, I
right?
think so too. 11, 12,
That's the only thing I wrote
13,
down.
14.
Yeah.
So, proposed amendment number 1 would be modified to read 20.2.5 monumentation. The owner or developer shall provide permanent reference monuments and final subdivision plans, ...
Yeah. Can I take a stab at a motion?
Yeah, please.
Move to approve amendments to the planning board subdivision regulations, site development standards, earth excavation regulations, and application procedures as shown in the memorandum to the planning board dated November 14th, 2025, with an effective date of January 1, 2026, with the exception of Amendment 1, striking the words "in accordance with Article 23 of this LDC," and capitalizing the first letter of the next word to complete the sentence, and striking Amendment 2 entirely, with the intent that the definition is sent forward to City Council for a different amendment.
Thank you.
Second.
Do you get a second?
Yeah, second.
Any further discussion or deliberation? All right, let's call the vote. So all those in favor of motion 1, amending the planning board subdivision regulations? Any opposed? Okay, you have the second motion there too?
Move to refer the amended regulations to City Council for incorporation into Chapter 100 Land Development Code of the City Code of Ordinances.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Engel. Any discussion or deliberation? Okay, let's call the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Approved. Councilor Remy.
Thank you. This was a great meeting to do this in, where we didn't have other topics, and we were trying to
Oh,
like
I know.
split brain power between
Yeah.
this like heavy work and like trying to deal with a public application, so. As much as like we didn't have a public application, this was a perfect meeting to do this in. so
Yeah, it worked out well. Thank you, Mary.
So for the next agenda item, unless you want to table that to another meeting?
Yeah, I think we should table that,
Okay,
since Councilor Remy suggested we used up almost all of our brain power.
I was also gonna ask if I could be excused, because I don't need training on that if I'm off, you know.
Yeah, okay. You're sticking it out. All right, so, Ms. Brenner, any staff updates? Other than they left you all by yourself tonight?
no, I don't think so. Yeah, no staff updates. We are working on sort of like an implementation plan for the master plan, so more to come on that. I think we're kind of waiting for the city council to finish their goals. But it seems like what they're coming up with aligns very nicely with the master plan goals. So we will hopefully have more on that early in the year. Next meeting is very full. We have 6 public hearings, and also the meeting schedule for next year. And then in the new year, we're going to be jumping right into CIP. So you have a busy couple months ahead
Next
of you.
meeting is the 22nd of December?
Yes, and that is something I wanted to mention because it's the Monday before Christmas. And there's a lot of there's a lot going to that meeting, so. Yeah, including a cottage court, and it's actually really cool, but it's gonna be a lot, so just a heads up.
Well, we'll just have to make sure we do our homework and can get through them quickly.
You're gonna get some of your neighbors up on the podium here.
Yeah,
Show up.
yeah. All right, thanks, Ms. Brenner. Any new business anyone has? Okay. Upcoming dates of interest. Joint Committee of the Planning Board and PLD, December 8th, although likely to be canceled. I'm sure you're brokenhearted about that. Planning Board Steering Committee, December 9, 12 p.m. Via Teams. Planning Board Site Visit, December 17th. Sounds like it's possible we could have site visits that day. Last month, we tried something different. We had site visit at like 4:30 and got reasonable attendance.
Yeah.
So we might go back to something like that instead of 8 a.m.
Okay. Would you like me to send out a doodle poll or something like that, just to get a sense from everybody when they're available?
Say that again? Sorry, I didn't
Do you want me to send out a poll to see if people are available on the Wednesday or the day of the meeting, like what time would work better for people?
hear. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to think outside the box a little bit to get quorum at these visits. And then the final date of interest, Planning Board next meeting, as we just discussed, December 22nd, 6:30. No more time items, and with that, I will declare the meeting adjourned. But I would ask if you guys would hang out for just 1 second.